Every emunah, every faith has to be internalized for it to have a proper effect. Like, for example, Bilam obviously believed he was a Navi. He even saw godliness. That's what a Navi is, right? A seer. And yet, wasn't a better person because of. He even admitted that he can't say anything unless God tells him or lets him. And he still wasn't a nicer person. And that's not unnatural. That is the nature of faith, of emunah. Emunah is a makif. It surrounds you. It doesn't permeate you. It's not internalized. So the Gemara says that the ganef, the burglar, before he breaks into a home, prays that he should be successful because he knows that without God's help, you can't be successful. So he believes or he doesn't believe? Of course, he believes. He puts all his trust in God. But what does he do? He's a burglar. So you can say that's hypocritical. But it's not really. When I say I believe in God, it doesn't mean I think stealing is wrong. Not hypocritical. If I say I believe stealing is wrong and then I steal, then I'm a hypocrite. But if I say God created the world and I want to steal, what was the hypocrisy? So Hasidus was a process, a method by which you internalize what you believe. In one sense, it's, yes, there is a creator and he created the whole world and he is infinite and he is big and he is great. But until he becomes your king, won't have any effect on you. So if you say Melech Ha'olam, that's good. It's not going to change you. When you say Avinu Malkeinu, now you're making it personal. Now it'll have an effect on you. So how do you make it personal? So the Alter Rebbe wrote a Tanya to tell you how to internalize godliness. What does that have to do with a dira b'tachtayna? We're here to make the world a place for God. You're internalizing it so that you're more sensitive, more responsive to what God wants. But where's the dira b'tachtayna? How are you making the lower world godly? The answer is, if you believe in God, you're not making the world godly, because belief is outside the world. But if you understand godliness, a human brain can absorb godliness, that's a dira b'tachtayna. Because a human brain is already a very low, earthy part of creation. But it was hardly noticeable, wasn't it? Somebody sits and davens for a long time and learns this, and all of a sudden what he believed now also makes sense to him. You don't really notice the change in the tachtayna. But it was a big accomplishment for that time. This kind of helps understand. Avraham was the first Jew. Why? Noach was a tzaddik. Hanoich was a tzaddik. Adam was a tzaddik. So why weren't they? In other words, they had a nefesh elikis. Why weren't they Jews? Avraham was the first one who recognized God, not believed. Obviously, Noach believed in God, spoke to him for 100 years. Adam certainly believed in God. But Avraham was the first one to think his way to an awareness or a knowledge of God. That's why he could explain to people why worshiping idols was wrong. So his relationship with God was not the same as Noach's and Adam's or Chanech and Sishelach. So bringing understanding of godliness into a human mind, that was a big accomplishment. And that's what the Berditchever meant when he saw the first copy of the Tanya. He said, how do you put such a big God into such a little book? He wasn't talking about a book. Like, how big does a book have to be? If it's a bigger book, you can put it. How do you put God into a little book? How do you put him in a big book? How do you put him in a book altogether? What he meant was, how can you bring such a big God into human understanding? A book means to understand, to learn. If you read and you don't understand, so the Berditchever was impressed how you can make sense to a human soul, how you can make sense of godliness. That was the Dira B'Tachtenim in the first stage of Hasidus. Who did the Alter Rebbe teach Hasidus to? People who knew the whole Torah. To all the Gedolim, to all the Talmidei Chachamim. But it was still human beings able to understand godliness. In a very superficial way, the Mittler Rebbe made Hasidus understandable to people who were not Talmidei Chachamim, the average person. Tzemach Tzedek made it more understandable. He made it like you can understand Gemara. That's how you understand Hasidus. Why do you understand Gemara so well?
Intellectual.
Huh?
Intellectual.
Intellectual? Yeah. Of course it is. It's brilliant, right? But what is it about? Yeah. It's about two people who share a piece of property. How do you divide it? Who gets what? Or two neighbors, and you want to put up a fence on whose property should it go? If a bull kills a cow. So you're talking about things you can see, things that you know, things you're familiar with. You're trying to figure out what's the best way to deal with it. So the Gemara is brilliant. But what are you dealing with? You're dealing with things that you have in your backyard. What should I do with the cow that was killed by a bull? Here's the cow right in front of your eye. What am I going to do with it? Who is responsible? Who gets the leftovers? Practical. You're learning godliness. What are you learning? What was there before the world was created? Oh, how am I supposed to know that? So in Hasidus, when you're talking about godliness, you're talking about a subject you can't see, that you've never experienced, and you have to get to know it purely with your mind, not with your eyes, not with your hands, not with your experience. For that, your mind has to be much more ego. So when the Tzemach Tzedek made Hasidus as understandable as Gemara, that's amazing. Like I asked the Shliach years ago. So we're learning about Kriyas Yamsuf, and it says that by Kriyas Yamsuf, the maids saw more godliness than the biggest Navi. So I said, what do you mean they saw? What did they see? What did they describe? How do you see godliness? And without a minute's hesitation, he said, they saw what we saw every Simchas Torah in 770. Watching the Rebbe celebrate Simchas Torah, you saw godliness. Yeah, with your eyes. Not everybody who was standing there in 770 realized what they were looking at. But if you learn Chassidus and you understand what Chassidus says, then when you see the Rebbe dancing Simchas Torah, you know what godliness is. Skip to the Frierdiker Rebbe. The Frierdiker Rebbe brought Hasidus down to where the average person, the average Jew, could have Mesiras Nefesh for every mitzvah.
You repeat it?
The average Jew in Russia could have Mesiras Nefesh for every mitzvah. For davening, for Shabbos, for Yom Tov, for an Esrog, Mesiras Nefesh for every and all mitzvahs. That's an amazing dira b'tachtayim. That kind of godliness that human beings are capable of, but then your Shvat, Tafshin Yud, something radical happened. All of a sudden, dira b'tachtayim was no longer inside of you. Not in your mind, not in your heart, not in your learning, not in your Mesiras Nefesh. All of a sudden, dira b'tachtayim meant anything and everything outside of you. It's almost like anything but you. The whole world. Dira b'tachtayim now meant the whole world. And even that came in stages. First, you have to go to people who know nothing, who do nothing, who observe nothing, who care about nothing in Judaism, and get them to care. This was unheard of. In Russia, you reached out to people who were observant, who were frum, who believed, but they were afraid. So they gave up mitzvahs because they were afraid. So the Rebbe sent shluchim to different parts of Russia to make a cheder and to teach the kids whose parents were religious, but they were afraid to teach their kids. But nobody ever went to be makar of somebody who doesn't believe and is not interested and didn't ask for help. Because the assumption was, if they don't care and they don't want, what are you going to tell them? What are you going to tell them? Thank you very much. I don't care. Leave me alone. The Rebbe said, this is Deit HaShvi. Everything is different. Deit HaShvi is a radical step, not just another gradual step. This is a radical step. So people started going to colleges. This is in the 50s. They started making events for college students to challenge them for their disbelief. In other words, now the Dira B'Tachteinen was to bring godliness where it was missing. This was a little scary. You're sending people to go debate Yiddishkeit with people who don't believe. They're going to get into arguments. They're going to not be able to answer. They'll develop their own doubts. And eventually your shliach will never come back because he stopped believing too. Isn't that possible? So the whole religious world was against it. But this is crazy. They very strongly disapproved. It took about 40 years until the rest of the world said, reaching out is a very nice thing to do. It works. Sure, 40 years later. And then all of a sudden, there isn't a Jewish organization who doesn't do outreach. Because if you're not doing outreach, it's like you're not doing anything. You're not making any difference. You can't even justify the existence of the organization if you're not doing outreach. Then the final step was when the Rebbe said, we are also responsible to bring godliness to the non-Jewish world. Now we're talking Dira B'Tachteinen, the whole world. Or in different words, Yafutza Ma'nesecha Chutza, now we're talking Chutza. For a long time before, Chutza means people who are not yet frum. Now we realize Chutza means the whole world, nothing less. So it is a pretty radical change. But when we say change, we don't just mean a new exciting project. Why was this not a project a generation ago? Because a generation ago, 2 generations ago, it was not possible. It wasn't humanly possible. It could not happen. The world was not ready. The plan according to God's schedule, it wasn't ready. It could not happen. If it could, we would have done it. So something changed in the world, in creation. And all of a sudden, this became possible. So, new possibility, new obligation. As it becomes possible, we have to step in and do it. We have to keep up with the godliness that is available in our time. The godliness that is available in our time appeals to everybody without exception. So yes, you can inspire everybody. Your grandfather could not do that. It wasn't possible. It's as if in the times of the Alter Rebbe, that God came to the Alter Rebbe and said, the scholars, the Talmidei Chachomim in the world are ready to understand Hasidus. So go teach them. In this generation, God, Eibishter, said to the Rebbe, the whole world is now ready. This is what you tell the world. Okay, now we have the weapons, now we have the material, we have the message, now go deliver it. So it's almost like, no, not almost, it's the stages of Matan Torah. Just like creation didn't happen once and it's over, happens all the time. Same thing with Matan Torah. It didn't just happen once in this week's Seder. No, it happens continuously. It's like every day, the Eibishter comes down to Mount Sinai and tells you something new. So now you can do more. In our generation, the Eibishter said, I am giving you now the wisdom and the Torah that you can tell everybody anywhere in the world, and they will understand it. Right? So now we're responsible for the whole world. So it's not like, wow, the Rebbe came up with such a brilliant plan. He's so organized, and he sent shluchim all over. And it's really a good plan. It's a good organization. It's very effective. You're missing the point. It's the Torah of our generation. And he says about Matan Torah that these are the words that the Eibishter said. He said it, leimer. What does that mean? Usually, when the Eibishter is talking to Moshe, it says, the Eibishter said to Moshe, leimer, meaning that Moshe should hear and then say it to the Yidden. That he should, the Eibishter spoke to him that he should say it. To whom? To the Yidden. But at Matan Torah, every Jew was there. So what does leimer mean? The Eibishter said these words to be said. To be said to whom? Everybody was there. So it means to be said to the next generation. And today it means to be said to the non-Jewish world. So the Lamed extends further and further and deeper and closer to earth. We can understand it, we can give examples for it. Science is starting to see it also. It's coming down to earth so that it's available to everybody. So one final thought. If you ask anybody who learned anything, do you know, do you understand God? The answer is no, it's impossible. Les machshava tfisa me. No one can understand God, not even the angels, except, the Rebbe says in Tanya, that when the Eibishter put himself into Torah, then the Eibishter, who could not be understood by anyone, suddenly became understandable to everyone. Anyone who can learn Torah can understand the Eibishter. But in Torah, there are so many levels. So the deeper you go, the more of the Eibishter you get to understand. So in our generation, the completeness of understanding the Eibishter and getting familiar so that you could actually discuss the Eibishter like you discuss a Gemara. What to do if you find an old shmata? Do you return it? You don't return it? How long do you try? Where do you keep it? What do you do with it? Where does such an understanding come from? From the part of Torah that is called Hasidism. So through Torah and the various aspects of Torah, the Eibishter becomes familiar, knowable, real, so that we can talk about him like we talk about every other. That's called Dira B'Tachtana. This is our generation. So if you learned any Tanya, you know that one of the Alter Rebbe's favorite words is the word mamash. Nefesh Hashem is b'Yisrael u'chelek elaka mima'al mamash. The mitzvah of Avos Yisrael is to love every Jew mamash. You should be humble before every person mamash. Because all of these things, people always knew, but they never saw it as being like mamash. Yeah, you have to love every Jew. Mamash. That's not possible. Like really every love them like yourself. Not exactly like yourself. I mean, not mamash. The Alter Rebbe said, no. If you don't understand it mamash, then you don't understand it. So I asked the shliach who teaches Tanya online, I said, can you sum up the Tanya? Can you sum it up in one line? He said, one line? One word. I said, what's that? He said, mamash. Pretty good analysis. course, it takes the whole Tanya to explain how it could be mamash, because it doesn't seem like it's possible. And then you have to have all sorts of Maimonim for 7 generations explaining what Tanya says, how it's really mamash. So now, in the day Hashvi, we should be at the stage of mamash. Pretty exciting stuff.
Can I ask you to clarify a point? Are you saying that it's as important to bring Torah to, not Torah, would be Shemas of to the not Jewish world as well as?
Maybe even more crucial.
Priority over. Why would you say that?
If we want to bring Mashiach, are we saying Olena every single day, 3 times a day? What are we not talking? The whole Olena doesn't talk about dreams. The Hafle say Lecha Kol Rishei Oretz Yakiru V'Yedu Kol. Is that about Jews?
When the Jews do the right thing, then the others see and they respond.
That's from a distance.
Really practically, if all out of Chof is being given with the Yiddishkeit, what is it actually to spread godliness?
It's not bringing Yidden to Yiddishkeit, bringing the world. And what does the world consist of? L'sakin oilom, not l'sakin Yidden. Pretty dramatic, no?
I've had this question for a while, kind of similar to this, where like, say I am interacting with an adjunct, like a taxi or another mother at the park, and we're talking about Yiddish, like Judaism, and let's say they say, okay, you know, I've always been interested in the Jewish message and Torah, so I tell them about, let's say, Shabbat Mitzvahs, and then I want to give them like a lasting message, kind of more than just like, these are the 7 commandments, and they're like, okay, I do this stuff. Like, what would you say to them, what kind of message would you leave to them or to think of them?
There was a Farbrengen where the Rebbe was talking about Sheva Mitzvahs, and the Rebbe got really, really upset. He was talking about a certain chassid, didn't mention the name, of course, and he said, you sat with a non-Jew for 2 hours and you never mentioned the Sheva Mitzvahs B'nai Noach? Are we supposed to? It was like a shock. They were talking business. So that you spent 2 hours and you didn't mention Sheva Mitzvahs. Oh, wow. So it doesn't mean you have to stop every person in the street and tell them about Sheva Mitzvahs. That's endless and take way too long, right? But we somehow carry that responsibility. So what can you say that is a really powerful message to people who certainly know that they shouldn't worship idols and they shouldn't murder and they shouldn't steal? Right? What are you telling them? Something they didn't know? Could actually be a little offensive. Do you know that you shouldn't steal? What do you think I am? You're going to tell them that there are 7 mitzvahs. They think they have 10 mitzvahs. They think they're following the 10 commandments. So you got to be really careful. You're not talking down to them, right? So what is the message? The message is all of these things are not for your benefit. They're all much more important because this is what God is waiting for. That's something new. And that is totally inspiring. It's not for you. And in fact, the Rambam says that who is a righteous Gentile? Who are the Hasidei Umas Olam? Not somebody who keeps the Sheva Mitzvahs. Somebody who does the Sheva Mitzvahs because the Torah told them to. Not because it's good for them. Which is really interesting. Why are they called Hasidei Umas Olam? If you keep the Sheva Mitzvahs, you're a Hasid. You're a good guy. What? Hasidei Umas Olam? Call them Tzadikei Umas Olam. Because if you do what you're commanded to do, you're a tzaddik. You're a Hasid. How did they become Hasidei Umas Olam? Chassid means beyond the letter of the law. Beyond the letter of the law means you're doing it l'shem shamayim. So if a non-Jew performs keeps the seven mitzvahs, because the Eibishter is expecting it and wants it from him, that's Hasidei Umas Olam. And the whole problem with religion, which everybody now admits, everybody realizes religion is a failure because it focuses on you. What you get, what you benefit, that's no different than a salesman who tells you how easier your life will be if you have this vacuum cleaner. So religion comes along and says how much nicer your life will be if you have this kind of God. It's not the real thing. So you're not coming to a non-Jew and saying, be a decent human being. You're talking to decent human beings. So what are you adding? What are you saying that's inspiring? Behave yourself. You're saying that as much as we need these laws, not to kill each other, not to steal from each other, as much as we need it, the Eibishter needs it infinitely more. Do it for him. Make sense? I was talking to a priest, not a minister, a priest, Catholic. And I asked him, he's very popular with the teenagers and he has programs for the teenagers. I said, what theology do you teach them? What do you tell them about God? He says, I tell them that it's their responsibility to make the world better. This is so unbelievable. This is so new. It's like the Rebbe's language. So I said, add one little detail. True, it is our job to make the world better, but who cares that the world should get better? Who is concerned that the world should get better? The teenager you're talking to? Who is supposed to make the world better? No. Who cares that the world should get better? Obviously, it's creator. Whoever created the world is interested in making it better. So if you work at making the world better, who are you serving? What are you fulfilling? you're fulfilling the Creator's purpose. He got so excited about it. He said, I never understood what they taught me in divinity school or whatever it was. What they taught me was that God doesn't care. He's perfect. He doesn't care about his creation. Why should we? So we want to make the world better for what? You're going to say, make your neighborhood better. You'll have a better life. The real estate will go up. Okay, that makes sense. But you tell every teenager that he's responsible for the world? It's crazy. Teenagers never left the neighborhood yet. You're making him responsible for the whole world? You're responsible to the Creator of the world who wants the whole world better. So if you can do your share, you're making the world better. Now, do you believe that, or does that make sense to you? There's a big difference. Bais is here. Good 12, good 12, good 12. Come on. Sure. Come on. Here. Seats in the back, seats in the front. So there were years where the Rebbe was urging people to go on shluchos, and there was a big resistance. Wasn't easy. Rebbe spoke about it once and again, and first people didn't even believe what the Rebbe was saying. What? And then they realized what the Rebbe was saying, and they said, "Can't do that. Can't do that. That's not Hasidus." At one point, the Rebbe said, "There's going to come a time when you're going to beg me to go on shluchos. Now I'm begging you, but there will come a time you're going to have to beg me." What does that mean? Right now, I'm begging you, and you have to believe me that this is a good plan, this is necessary, this is the right thing. That there will come a time when you will beg me, meaning it'll make so much sense to you that you wouldn't be able to, like, hey, come on. That's what I got to do. Let me do it. So we go from accepting something on belief to understanding it, appreciating it, internalizing it. So did that make sense? We want to fix the world for ourselves, or we want to fix the world for the creator of the world. It is so obvious, so simple, so convincing. And yet, if you said this to your grandfather, who was a rabbi in Russia, he would say, you're crazy. Makes no sense. It's not possible. It's not Yiddishkeit. There has been such a radical change. Not in Yiddishkeit, in our thinking. So is it so surprising that even after Gimel Tammuz, people continue to go on shlichus, and even more in number than before? Once it becomes your understanding, you don't need any further encouragement. So I don't know if people will appreciate this, but it's probably true. The shluchim who went out before Gimel Tammuz are not the real shluchim. The real shluchim are the ones who went out after Gimel Tammuz. Make sense? The ones who went out before, could be they were doing the Rebbe a favor. Could be. After Gimel Tammuz, they're not doing the Rebbe a favor. They just understand that it is the normal, right thing to do, which is very impressive. Godliness has become sensible instead of heavenly. So I just heard a story. So it was news to me, so it might be news to you too. Back in the terrible days of communism, it was absolutely endangering your life to send a letter to America or to receive a letter from America, because they were so suspicious and they were so paranoid. Of course, they read every letter that came and went. So the only safe communication was with your parents or your grandparents or your immediate family. Anything other than that, they came to your house and wanted to know what's going on. Why do you have contacts with America? So people would write to the Rebbe. They would address the Rebbe as Zaidi. I'm writing to Zaidi to find out whatever. And even then, if the address was in Brooklyn, they weren't fooled. They knew. This one guy smuggles a letter out to the Rebbe, risking his life. He desperately needs to have an answer to his question. What is his question? He works as a bookkeeper, and he has to work on Shabbos. There's no way. to avoid. Because you see, if you don't work on Shabbos, then you're a parasite. You're taking advantage of the country. You're not contributing, but you're benefiting from the country, so you're a parasite. And for that, you go to Siberia and you get shot. So you had to work on Shabbos. His problem was that, in fact, he never worked on Shabbos. He would walk to the office, go into his cubicle, close the door, and daven a whole day. And then when everybody else went home at night, he also went home. So, in fact, he was not violating Shabbos at all. But he gave the appearance. He made it look like he was working on Shabbos. He felt that because of that, he was not supposed to touch the wine that you use for Kiddush, because if somebody who doesn't keep Shabbos touches the wine, you don't use it for Kiddush. Okay, so you make Kiddush on Challah. Problem is that the Alter Rebbe in the custom of Chabad says that Friday night you should not make Kiddush on Challah, you have to use wine. So now he doesn't know what to do. How should he make Kiddush? Should he make Kiddush on the Challah, even though it's not the Chabad custom? Or should he make Kiddush on the wine, and even though the wine is not so kosher? The Rebbe told the story at a Farbrengen. He said, I got a letter, and he was choked up. The Rebbe was crying. He was so impressed with this. To know whether he should follow the custom or do the, for this he risks his life. He couldn't get over it. A few days later, there was a rabbi, famous rabbi, came to see the Rebbe, and the Rebbe told him that on Shabbos, I mentioned the story about a person in Russia, because they were talking about Russian Jewry. So he said, you want to know what's going on in Russia? Listen to this. This guy writes a letter just to find out what to do about this. So the rabbi said to the Rebbe, so what did you tell him? What should he do? The Rebbe said, that's not the point. The point is, look at the greatness of this Jewish soul. And the guy said, yeah, but what did you tell him? The Rebbe didn't want to answer him. I found out just yesterday that there were people in Russia who knew the story, and they knew what the Rebbe's answer was. The Rebbe's answer was, it's irrelevant. That was the answer. The guy got the answer, and he was like, it's irrelevant? He thought about it, What does the Rebbe mean? What is the Rebbe telling me? And he decided, the Rebbe is telling me there's no need to hide the fact that I'm keeping Shabbos. The whole drama, it's irrelevant. So he went to his boss and he said, I want you to know that I keep Shabbos and I have never worked on Shabbos for all these years. And the guy said, I don't care as long as you get the work done. And that's it. The problem was over. So now I understand why the Rebbe didn't want to tell the rabbi what his answer was, because he didn't give an answer. He performed a miracle. You know what's really impressive? The Hasid's understanding of that answer. How did he make that connection? It's irrelevant means stop hiding the fact that you're keeping Shabbat. I guess the Rebbe knew that he would understand. Why didn't the Rebbe say in the answer, in the letter, just tell them you're keeping Shabbos? Because of all the others who are reading the mail. You don't have to tell the KGB that you're keeping Shabbos. Just tell your boss, and he doesn't care. So how do you send that message without putting it into words that the KGB should not see? That whole chapter of history of how Chassidim kept Yiddishkeit alive in Russia, we have no idea. They were so brilliant, so sophisticated, so outsmarting the most brilliant, evil people who thought they had everybody outsmarted themselves. Egypt was smart.
No. At the time of the Hebrews, the Israelis were in Egypt. It was an awful time, just like that. Jews kept Jewish life alive, even though it was not good, it was forbidden to those doing things.
So as long as we're sitting here, can anybody tell a little bit about Bais?
From how many generations ago?
Anything.
As old fogies. I remember when your daughter was, how old?
I remember when you were a big
3 years old. And Benny Friedman would take your microphone and lie on the floor in front of you and sing Avraham Fried songs. And he was around 2 years old.
Avraham Fried
Avraham Fried songs.
was 2 years old.
No. We all knew he'd become something.
But you were there?
I don't remember the maybe 35. I don't know. I was there for him. We requested a special session from Rabbi Friedman to know how to really be a counselor. I know we were counselors. He gave us a private session, and I never forget. Rabbi Friedman told us. I don't know, it's about how hard it was when he had to start with this kind of.
Very shy.
Mhm.
Very shy. They're very shy.
Very shy. Anything but.
What was the question?
Are you too shy to say anything?
What was the initial
Say something about baseball.
What about it?
It's a great program.
A few of us here just got back from snorkel and study. Like, when was it? 2 weeks ago? We were all in the Keys together in Key Largo, Florida. And raise your hand if you were just there. 3 of us? Kayla, oh, you were on camp. It's like about 70 college students for 7 days. And we all sat together and learned and hung out, and someone chime in.
And connected and inspired, and now we have a snorkel and study girl in town. We threw a whole entire Shabbaton for her, and there's every single weekend people are coming. And I actually got to go on the next 2 retreats with Rabbi Friedman to the single moms and women of all ages in Pensacola, and there was a lot of stuff happening.
We just talk about the deepest, like, It's a crash course. It's a 1 week crash course of what was your theme this year? I feel like there was like a
Go and strangers come back friends.
it's true, it's crazy. We got on the bus from Miami Airport to Fort Lauderdale Airport on the way there. Literally strangers. And everyone's like tired and not sure how to interact the first time.
Mhm.
And on the way back, on the way to the airport, it's like we just spent an entire year together. Wild.
It sounds.
Write us a book.
See, when you were there was no age distinction. There was no. Now we're very sophisticated. Now we have college students separately, teenagers separately, 55 and over, single mothers. We're very specialized now.
The whole
We've
world
become
is-
sophisticated.
We should do that again. But like women's is kind of like
Women's
that.
is kind of that.
Which,
Women's is kind of that.
Like the summer Minnesota women's is kind of like that.
yeah, because younger people sneak in,
Yeah. A lot of fish.
but there was something special about it. Teenagers and bubbies sitting together in the same class.
Someone from the college program brought her mother.
Yeah.
Sophia.
This year,
Yeah.
Um,
She's at Brown One Med School. Her mother's doctor.
I came as a student 4 years ago, as a college student. Then I was a Montreal College student. Nice, like growing up.
you met her last year too. Tell the truth.
Good place. Good place.
For a number of years, I don't know how many years, we called it the Women's Institute for the Study of Judaism. Just to make it sound sophisticated, because it wasn't. But then, I don't remember what year it was, we asked the Rebbe if we could name it after his mother and call it Bais. And it was unheard of. Now every girl's program is Bais Chana or Machon Chana or something with Chana. But at that time we were afraid. Was it not respectful? Was it, I don't know, just used it as his mother's name. So we wrote to the Rebbe and asked, daringly. And the Rebbe approved, and it was very, very exciting. Then we started giving out tapes, cassette tapes of the classes. Now I was worried, can I call it tapes of Bais Chana? Because now it's a commercial product. Put the Rebbitzon's name on it. So the first set that came out was like a big album, with a plastic cover, and it held 12 cassettes inside. So on the back, we put a picture of the Rebbe's mother and a little description of her. I sent it into the Rebbe and said, is this okay? Actually, we said, we hope that this is a nachas for the Rebbe. And the Rebbe added to the word nachas, he added the word very. So I was like, wow. So I have a feeling the Rebbe took the program very personally. He didn't just allow us to name it after his mother. If it was going to be after his mother, it meant that it had to be special. So the Rebbe invested some special interest. And that's why it has this magical flavor to it. all these years later.
What's that story? Wasn't there a story of this girl who was somehow traveling and stopped in Minnesota? And someone heard on a phone call. I don't know how she decided to stay at the program. Is it ring any bells?
You know who she's talking about? You know what she's talking about? I think you were there that year.
Those two Israeli girls who they're having a hallucination of having these, having these two different stories.
Not those weirdos.
Different
Oh. What was her name? I'll think of it in a second. She wanted to become a Mormon.
Tova Mordechai?
No, she was a Mormon.
She went the other way.
Yeah. Oh, what's her name? The redhead. Huh?
Where is she now?
Here.
Malka Tish? Malka?
Malka.
Tish? Malka Becker?
Yes. That's Malka Tish.
Malka Tish?
Yeah, remember Malka Tish?
Malka Beck.
You know her. Her daughter came to Bais. Soon her granddaughters are going to come.
Usually.
She just wandered through?
Huh?
How'd she end up here?
She was on her way to Utah to become a Mormon. And her mother convinced her to stop on the way because Minnesota is kind of halfway. Maybe she'll change her mind. So she happened to be there when a whole class of Lutheran ministers came to Chabad house. And she couldn't believe. So she decided to stay.
She wrote about it also. She was there when the ministers was Did they ever send anybody to this one?
Yes. Turn this off.